district, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offer's the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice, from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man, y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be trading. And I always be trading. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
What is up, Fantasyland? We are back in the district for a monster MiLLY BiLLiE tonight. You know how we do it on this channel. Smash the like, smash the subscribe. We talk about winning big money tournaments on the regular on this show. Our guests come in and talk to us about winning big money tournaments on this show. And tonight we have two of the best in the high stakes realm, just dominating, excuse the pun, these leagues. No matter how big the stakes, these guys are in the ring. And we're going to talk to them tonight, Theo, and we're going to pick their brain, talking tiers, talking strategy, talking all kinds of goodness. I'm a bit under the weather, so you're gonna take hold and cruise the ship. How pumped are you to have these two on tonight?
No, so I'm super stoked for tonight. We've had a lot of really successful high stakes fantasy players have come on the GOAT District, but this is the first time that we've had co-managers come on. Billy Muzio and Dave Hubbard, our two guests tonight, are very well-known high-stakes players in their own right, but they also partner up for a lot of teams, from lower stakes up to extremely high stakes. They're going to help share their process on how they split teams, on basically the general strategy for approaching different formats and drafts. And then we're going to talk about some big questions that I think a lot of people are missing out on these fantasy podcasts this time of year. So first of all, Billy Muzio, welcome back to the GOAT District. Billy is the senior high stakes analyst for Full-Time Fantasy. He is also the co-host for the Dominator podcast. How are you doing tonight, Billy?
I'm doing good, boys. Thanks for having us on.
Maybe, Billy, you could quickly share some of the new things you're doing right now that you've started doing this summer before we dive into it with you guys.
Yeah. So Full-Time FFWC hired me as a contractor / analyst, and it kind of developed into a role of rebranding and redeveloping the tools and the high stakes site. So we completely redesigned the website. I know I'm sending it over to all you guys to take a look at it. Redid the lobby page, redid the draft room, redid all the tools in the draft room, redid the draft board, like head to toe, left to right, top to bottom. It's been redesigned. Still working on some back-end stuff with like the dashboard that's linked to like the payment system, but from a teams management perspective, and once you're in the lobby, everything's been redesigned. And so really excited for that to kick off. I think it looks night and day difference. I would say now it's, one of the better designs out there from a high stakes perspective. And it's taken us a long time. I've been working on it for about 2.5 months every day. And so it's finally there. And I've been excited to kind of share that release with you guys as we've been, promoting it out to the general public now.
Yeah, and I recently did a draft with Billy. There was a couple other very sharp players in that draft, but it was your $50 best ball Superflex tournament. Maybe you could share a little bit more about that format with everyone, because I think it's a really, really nice tournament right now.
Yeah, it's a completely new format in terms of like pass-throughs and the shootout. So unlike a traditional best ball tournament, there's none of this high variance get lucky crap, right? It's not who has the most points week 15 and then you had a bad week and you're eliminated. This tournament was designed in order to really benefit the highest scoring team. So take like a traditional tournament into play, where you have the most points through weeks 1 through 14. Those points roll over into the tournament. So you start week 15 with your season average, and then it's a 3-week shootout, weeks 15, 16, 17. So it truly benefits the best scoring or the highest scoring team in the tournament. And there's no ifs and or buts. Like, if you got third, you can't whine about it. You had the third most points in the league, right? There's no variance to it. It's purely statistical, and 100% benefits the team with the most points.
No, it's definitely awesome, and I agree with Billy. The website's looking good.
Yeah.
You know, the interface is great. I mean, you guys have really made that thing looking awesome over there. So, Billy's a fantastic player, but Billy also splits teams with Dave Hubbard, who's one of the best players, I think, in the country. Dave took down the 2016 FFPC main event. He's a feared player in the NFFC streets. If you see Dave in one of your drafts, you know you're in for a real tough one. How you doing today, Dave? Welcome to the GOAT District.
Well, doing good, Theo. How you doing tonight? Thanks for having us on.
Oh no, I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled to have you guys on tonight. So let's just dive into it. You guys split teams. You guys will do a number of 350s up to, what was your highest split entry last year that you guys did?
20K.
So you did 20K
NFC Platinum at the NFFC.
And then you guys are splitting the high societies in the FFPC as well?
Yes, I did Billy doesn't do NFFC, so I did that Platinum with Nelson Sousa was my partner in the Platinum. Billy and I are going to do three 10Ks this year, 2 at FFPC and 1 at FFWC.
That's awesome. So let's talk about it. You guys decide on a draft with one another. How are you attacking the process of preparing for that draft?
We kind of
go ahead
about
and take it either one, guys.
Well, we start out by we have our own thought process, and then we talk, and then we go into the draft, and we're on a kind of like a Zoom like this doing the draft, and we rarely run into a bump. It's crazy how locked in we get. We might disagree on a player here or there, but we come to an agreement, and all the drafts I've done with Billy, which is a lot now. I don't think we've ever really got crossways on a pick where, no, I don't want that guy, I'm not going to do that, which happens in partnerships in fantasy. But we tend to agree on a lot of the same stuff after we've done our analysis. Here and there, like I said, there might be a player or two that we disagree on, but overall, we come to pretty close to the same conclusions of how we want to structure teams. And later we're going to talk about tiers. I'm really not a big tier guy. I'm more of a construction guy, like a player fits my build. I used to joke around on Twitter, call them matrix software. I truly believe that. I think the drafts are more like a matrix. And if you structure your team a certain way, another player might fit that build better than some other player that you might have ranked higher in a tier. So I think tiers sometimes mess up drafters and actually might even confuse people that are just starting out drafting, because they mess up their construction so bad that the tiers didn't help them at all anyway. So,
yeah, in terms of like draft prep, Dave and I each have our own process, and like I'll do projections, and Dave is over here. You know, he's dedicated. He's grinding all night. He'll message me at like 2, 3 in the morning. I found another gem watching tape, and so we share our knowledge with each other based upon our analysis, and then once we get in our first couple draft rooms together, we usually start talking about players that we like or don't like. And we've had plenty of conversation leading up to those drafts as well. But he hit the hammer on the nail. We really haven't had a major disagreement. Like, there's been times where we've, talked it down and got auto-picked recently. But, that was luckily we had him in the queue. But it was most of the time there's a tiebreaker. And when there's a tiebreaker with him and I, it's usually the same tiebreaker. How much ownership do you have? How much ownership do I have? And we look at that, and whoever is either overweight or underweight on that player, we make that final decision based upon our partner's ownership. So if Dave is 27% and I'm 13% and I want this guy, then hey, Dave will give me that guy because he knows I need to get more ownership, or vice versa. If he doesn't want him or whatever it may be, we'll adjust based upon whoever has more or less ownership and go with the person who needs him the most. So that's probably our ultimate tiebreaker. But I agree, Dave and I have not had a lot of spats. We seem to see a lot of things eye to eye. It's sometimes, you look at it as a partnership and you say you almost sometimes want to have spats so you can see things from different opinion, but so far it's been, pretty smooth sailing, and it's been to our benefit. So it's nice to have that, affirmation, or the confirmation, I should say, that I've identified the talent. Dave, who I consider to be one of the best talent identifiers in the world of fantasy football, will talk to me about a player he likes, and it's like, oh, great, I had that player on my list. I like this player. And I get to hear from him that why he likes the player, and it hits a lot of the same reasons why I like that player. So it's like I circle that player and say, okay, another great, person identifying talent also likes this player. I'm going to move him up my list because it makes more sense now.
Would you guys say that during your communication process, do you guys open each other's eyes up, based on your own priors? Maybe once in a while, Billy will change the way you think about something, Dave, and maybe, like you mentioned, Dave will open up your eyes to guys in that communication process, plus the high volume of drafting. Would you say that kind of hardens you up over the summer and gets you really, really in the zone when it comes to the money weeks of drafting?
I 100% believe that. Like I'm known for like overdoing it in what I call 350s. Some people that's a high price point, but for our portfolio, it's more like prep for me. So I feel like once I've done all these 350s, and everybody knows the head-to-heads is a factor and causes a lot of grief at the end of the year when you have a great team and it's third seed and it loses in the head-to-head and might have finished fifth overall with that team. But the 350s are invaluable to me as far as like learning how I want to structure these teams, learning where people go. Now, it changes throughout the summer, so you got to keep up with it. But I think that's a lot of my success in the mains and the high societies and the big money leagues is a direct result of the 350s. There's people that have been real successful in this that don't start till August. They have a different process. That's fine. But I think the 350s are invaluable when it comes to learning how to structure the team and what you like and what you think you can get away with in a main, where you can push a guy a little further or you can push a position a little further and structure your team where ultimately at the end of the year the team will be in the right position to do damage. And this year more than last year. Last year I think I drafted more to win leagues because there's a difference. This year I'm drafting more to win an overall, I think. So I might not have the success I've had in last 3 or 4 years. I've had a lot of success in winning leagues and league titles, but in the shootout I haven't had teams that exploded in the shootout. So I've changed my process a little bit, and I'm looking more at the end of the year drafting these teams. So we'll see how it goes.
Expand on that, Dave. When you're talking about, and I think that's a hard concept for some people, when you're in a 350 and it's a football guys draft, it's good competition. You recognize the number of the guys drafted against you. But when you say you're going for an overall versus just trying to win and get that, that $1,500 or a main event entry for next year, plus, get yourself to the shootout. What are you doing differently without giving it away to prepare yourself and get that team ready? Is it, you're looking at upside? Are you looking at correlation? What are you looking at?
I look at upside. I look at year-end schedule. A lot of people said you can't. I've had a lot of success. I know defenses change throughout the year, but a lot of times a strong defense will still be a strong defense at the end of the year. So I look at strength of schedule. I look at upside, how I view a player, his upside versus somebody else that I don't think has quite as much upside. And I'm going to put more of those guys on my team this year than I have in past. But I think the guys that are really good at this, that win year in and year out. I mean, some people have a big year and then they go away forever. But the guys that have been doing it for 20 years and are always win, I think they're real good at structuring their team, whatever that might be. And people that become really good at this don't get in a rut. They structure them many different ways. Most people we see, they do the same draft every time. They might do 100 drafts, but every draft looks exactly the same. And I notice these guys that draft early, a lot of them I recognize their names. I know a lot of them who they are, and they've improved. I mean, but they're still guys. You go in the draft when I talk about winning the overall. If you take 3 QBs on your roster in a 350, you're playing for $1,500. You're not playing for $500K. I don't care what anybody says. I've been doing this a long time. So the guys that are doing that, good luck to you. You might be thinking it's smart, but it's not smart. You might get lucky in the head-to-head and win $1,500, but you're never winning $500K because you're not putting people on your roster that can help you reach your end goal. Maybe their end goal is not winning $500K. Maybe they just enjoy the draft and taking 4 quarterbacks and they're happy with that. So be it. It helps me in the long run. It doesn't bother me at all because
it's kind of a small mentality. When
100% it is. You see it in best ball too. The guys in the best ball, it's even worse in my opinion because you're playing for no money in the league. I mean, the whole reason you're playing those best ball tournaments, I just started getting into best ball, and I'm going to do more in the 125s this year than I've done in years past. But they do the same thing. They're not playing for like to win the money. They're like, they get a joy out of it. One guy even put it in the chat. He gets a joy out of being a dick and blocking people. Well, okay. But I'm drafting to win the 200K at the end of the year. I'm not drafting for any other reason than that, because there's no league money in the best ball at all. So I think structure and identifying upside players is a big key to tournament play. I've talked to people, had debates on Twitter. They don't even understand what I'm saying. There's a big difference between trying to beat 11 people and trying to beat 15,000 people. There's a whole different mindset, and I've done both for years. It's a whole different strategy.
Billy, expand on that if you have anything to add in terms of Dave brought up a couple of mistakes he sees people making. Maybe if you see any similar mistakes, share those, and kind of expand on what Dave said about drafting to win an overall versus drafting to win a 12-man league when you're in one of these tournaments.
Yeah, I agree 100% what he said. Roster construction. I mean, prime example. He hit the hammer on the nail a couple nights ago. Some guy was making fun of our build, and he had 3 wide receivers through 14 rounds. And it's like, I literally typed in the chat after he was kind of mouthing off. I said, "Thanks for your donation," and but that's a huge factor. Like people, like I'd say sometimes a quarter of the room eliminates themselves based upon their poor roster construction. You know, they have too many quarterbacks. They don't have enough receivers, whatever it may be. They're weak in multiple areas. Like it's okay to be weak at one position, but if you're weak in 2 positions or 3 positions, you know, you're at a severe disadvantage, not only in your own league, but to win an overall. Dave mentioned upside. I think upside is one of the key factors. 2 is just uniqueness, right? When you look at building teams, you don't need to follow ADP to a T. Like Dave says, he doesn't like tiers, and I know that firsthand drafting with him. We're willing to push people up. We're willing to push people down. We're willing to kind of shift things up and forget about average draft position in order to build unique rosters that are unowned in tournaments or that are allowing you to, you know, really separate yourself from the field. And so by doing so, 1, you have to have a little faith in the players that you're selecting, but 2, you have to have, you know, a lot of faith in your talent to identify players, because you may have taken them around early, maybe a round and a half early, whatever it may be, because it fits your construction of your build or whatever it is that you are trying to achieve in that given draft. So, 1, it does not work well for the faint of heart, who those who are only doing, you know, 1, 2, 3, 5 of these things. It works better for volume drafters like Dave and myself, who are able to get a little bit more creative. But I still think at the end of the day, if I'm only doing 3 of these or 5 of these, I still want to have a place where I'm going to be able to be unique, and I'm not going to be like the general public. Like how many teams out there have a Jonathan Taylor Higgins start? Like it's like a dime a dozen, right? It's just everywhere, right? But how many players have, you know, player XYZ? Like that's what you need to look at when you're doing these tournaments and you're doing these drafts, and try to create something that's going to be less owned in the overall shootout.
And for full disclosure, I have 1 Jonathan Taylor Higgins team, but I also have Mike Evans on that team, so that team is still a little dangerous.
And we won't mention the third quarterback we just took in our tourney.
Well, that's a different beast. That's the super flex best ball format.
No, it's a 1. Isn't it 1 the 125 1 QB?
Oh, no, you're correct. But still I feel like in the best ball is a different beast. Like, and I think just to expand on what Dave and Billy are saying, when you're talking about redraft, like you can't be afraid of like fragility at a position. So like you bring up a drafter with the 3 wide receivers, you'll continually see these drafters maybe try to build depth, try to get those kind of safer guys that don't really ever end up really helping them. Are you guys seeing that same kind of mistake where you take these kind of like high floor guys that really don't have a whole lot of ceiling as like their bench stashes to try to build this team that really is not too exciting and not that dangerous? Are you seeing that sort of thing this time of year?
You see it all the time. I mean, it happens every day. It's also, you know, it's called defensive drafting too. Like someone will draft defensively. Like Dave mentioned, a guy said, I felt like being a dick and blocking you and taking a quarterback. Well, that's fine. You just shot yourself in the foot. Now you're not going to get 500,000 with that roster. But I can still find a value at quarterback doing something else. Like it doesn't matter to me what you do. Like, at the end of the day, we're here to draft the best team that we can draft, and I'm not too concerned about what you're doing. I'm not going to sit here and adjust my draft philosophy based upon how you're drafting. And if you're pushing a position, I'm not going to load up at the position because I think it's going to hurt you in any way. I want to make sure it's going to help me in the long run. Now, if I'm able to help myself and hurt you at the same time, great. But I'm not going to go out of my way to hurt you in a draft just because I want to be a dick. Like I'm going to make sure that it makes sense for my team, my roster, and that we have a chance to cash, the grand prize.
Stack blocking is really sick. We've talked about it on the show. It's just like you got to have something a little got to like walk around angry during the day if you want to get into a draft and just stack block and block others' builds. It's almost why would you try to get in there and not worry about your own team and build the best team you could?
I was going to say, Theo, you're talking earlier. There's an artistry to the roster construction and to building these roster, whether it's the uniqueness, trying to differentiate. So if you're too busy looking at everyone else's roster and trying to play off of that, it's hard to get into that and create that uniqueness and that effectiveness. And before we pass it to Hub, because I'm sure his answer will be way better than mine. But I talk about often when you're drafting these rosters, you're telling a story. As soon as you don't assume you're batting 1,000 on every pick, you've capped the upside and the ceiling of that roster. That's the way I see it. That's one reason I don't like handcuffs. Because you're assuming as soon as you take that second guy, unless he has standalone value, that that earlier pick is not going to give you full potential production. So to me, once you start trying to, add a safety jacket to your team or try to, get some depth like you talked about, Theo, that's where I have a problem, especially if it's in the wrong position. Hub, what do you think?
I do look at the draft board when I'm drafting, but I look at it more to see if I can push a player around the corner or something, not what you might be doing where I think I can take a quarterback. I can't probably count on one hand how many times I've taken a second quarterback because I thought I needed to. And that's more, to me, that's more of a confined league strategy. It is a strategy in confined leagues if a guy's dropped too far to block the guy. But in a tournament play, I think it's bad process and it's a bad strategy in the long run. It's gonna limit your upside tremendously. But yeah, as far as looking at the draft board, you should be looking at the draft board to try to see the flow and try to understand what you might be able to do with your team. Or this guy has unlimited wide receivers and there's 4 wide receivers you like, for example. You want to take a quarterback there and it's 3 picks later, you're going to probably get, if you like all 4 guys about the same, you're going to get one of the receivers you wanted. So you can take the other position at that point. That's why I look at a draft board. Sure. I could care less if you have 2 quarterbacks or you have 1 quarterback. Doesn't matter to me unless we're drafting in a 10K league, and I think that might help me win the confined league. Then yeah, sure, I might not give you that quarterback if I think it's a big deal against 11 competitors, but it's not a big deal against 15,000 competitors.
Hub, we have a question from Midnight Rider. Just regards to the FFPC, FFWC, NFFC. Any comments? Are you confident, or do you prefer one over the other? What's your thoughts on the different platforms?
People that know me know I'm confident in every format, but
Nice.
FFPC is definitely my favorite format. I mean, I like the FFWC. It offers a lot of variance, and I like the NFC. I've had a lot of NFFC. I've had a lot of success. Still, I haven't played there other than the 20K in 4 years, and I think I'm still the 3rd all-time.
Yeah, you're up there.
Leader there. So, but NFC is great. All those guys are great, but I just love the FFPC. I don't know what it is. I just feel real comfortable building teams there, and but I'm going to be doing the FFWC. I'm going to be doing all 3 this year. But as far as confidence right now, the drafts I've done for 2022, I'm definitely more confident in the FFPC right now than any format.
For me personally, I feel super confident in FFPC and also the NFFC, but I'm really enjoying the FFWC. I think it's another one. So like Dave, I'm going to be in all 3 this year. But for me, I've been in NFFC the longest, FFPC the second longest. They're all good, and at the end of the day, we're competing against a lot of the same guys. When it comes down to it, you'll see the same names. When it's August and September drafting. We don't need Billy to answer this one. Billy can draft in any single format there is under the sun. But I think we know his answer for this one. So we could skip that. I want to get back to draft prep. Let's say we discussed your process. Let's say you get the draft order. Let's say you get 7th pick. When you get a certain pick in a round, do you guys start do you have a few players you'd be comfortable taking there? Do you rank out that first selection and kind of let let the next few rounds kind of flow based off that first selection. Kind of share your process for when you two guys get a draft slot and how your communication goes.
I'll let Billy answer first. He already knows my answer to this, but I'll let him answer first.
Yeah, usually, I mean, you can have, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face, right? That's the famous saying, and it happens in a draft room too. Like, there's been times where Dave and I have been in the 12 hole, and I think most recently, I think it was inside the hardway draft that we did, and we said, hey, we're gonna go double running back, or I forgot whatever we said we were gonna do. We did a 180 like middle of the draft because value fell, and so we're gonna, depending upon what's happening in the draft board, who's going where, what's happening, we will alter that plan, right? So like Bruce Lee said, you want to be like water, my friend, and be fluid, and I think that is the same concept inside of a draft room. You can go in with a plan, but if things change, you want to make sure that you are able to be adaptable, moldable, and change with the board that's being given to you. Because if you go in with a hard plan, you stick to that hard plan, you may have passed up some significant value. And you may have limited your upside when building a roster, and especially hurting your chances at an overall championship. So, yes, we'll have a plan. It's a rough draft, and more than anything, it's not etched in stone. And depending upon where we're at in the draft, we will say, hey, we like, these 2 or 3 players if they land here first. And then depending upon how that board goes, we may change our plan altogether, and it may be something else as we're going.
Dave, anything to add?
I just don't care about draft slots. It's not. I'm not lying either. 1 through 12, I like them all. And there's literally, if I got this, you used the example of 7. I think this year more than years in the past, there's literally 12 people I could take at 7 and be happy with the start and move on with the draft and then structure the team from there. So I don't get caught up in the draft slots. And this year's even better this year because I've gotten the 5 slot and gotten a guy I probably would have taken 1 overall in that particular draft at the 5 slot. So I don't get caught up too much in the draft slot. I think you can build a winner from any slot. I think more goes into prepping and getting ready for the draft so you're ready for any scenario that might fall. And then like Billy says, I've changed my mind on how I want to structure a team based on whoever's there. So I don't go into a draft saying I'm only going to take these 4 guys. I might literally I could take somebody that goes in the second round and structure a team totally different. I'm talking strictly tournaments. I'm not talking confined leagues. Yeah. Confined leagues is a totally different process. But in tournaments like most of us are talking about and doing, literally this year there's 12, 15 guys I'd be happy to take at 7.
Let's pivot to that. So we talk about, NFFC will have a super, and then they'll have a prime time. The FFPC will have the varsity, and then they'll have a main event. You have these 12-team closed leagues. Then you have the big money tournaments. How does your approach to these drafts change when you guys are in a closed league versus a tournament play? Either one of you can jump in with that one.
Go ahead, Billy.
I think I'm not as worried about hitting lightning in a bottle in a confined league, right? Maybe I'm not necessarily drafting from a floor perspective either, but I'm not as inclined to shoot for the moon. And so when I'm doing this and I'm looking more at consistency now, and I'm looking more at, expected fantasy points. I'm looking more at an opportunity standpoint where, yes, these things are all part of my mindset when I'm drafting in tournaments as well, but I'm particularly more interested in the consistency of the player in his role, right? Where somebody like, for prime example, is like, I'm probably skipping on Will Fuller in a confined league, even as late as, maybe not because he's going so late, but bad example. Okay. But so either way, what I'm saying is that you have the players that you're shooting for the moon and you're trying to hit lightning in a bottle and you're just trying to get that uniqueness, the difference there. And then you have players that you're looking at, like a Mike Evans to me gets pushed up in a confined league, even though the news today is going to get pushed up anyways. And then I'm also looking at confined leagues and saying, I don't need to be unique, because now what I did in the previous 200 drafts doesn't matter. It's only these 11 people. So now whatever I did in terms of building unique rosters is out the window, because I only have to beat these 11 guys, and it doesn't matter what I've done previously. This is a whole new game, and it's only these 11 guys at the table I have to beat. And so I'm constructing a roster that I think is going to put up the most fantasy points and not necessarily going to have to shoot for the moon. I'll let Dave piggyback.
I'll give you an example. We did 2 10Ks last year. One was from the 12 hole, which Billy didn't want it at the time, and one was from like the 4 hole. Well, the 12 hole, we did what I call a confined league draft. We constructed that team, a confined league. It's probably the most dominant 10K team I've ever drafted in my life. Dominated the regular season, dominated all. But we wind up getting second at the end of the year. There's a lot of things with the way they structure those leagues. The other team we drafted more like what I would say is a tournament team, which I know we shouldn't do. That team also got an automatic bye and made the playoffs, but it wasn't near as good. And it was just we drafted it with, I don't know what we were thinking when we did it, but it was the second one we did, and we did it more of a home run draft, went straight receivers, where the other team we drafted more cookie cutter like you should in a confined league. Both teams wound up making money, and both teams got the automatic bye in the league, but the other team was just clearly more dominant and was better constructed. I talk about construction. So I think when you're in a confined league, construction matters.
Yeah, when you say, to put perspective how dominant that team was, Theo, second place was like 300 or something points behind us.
Yeah, that team was unbelievable.
Sounds pretty good to me. And I do think you see, and you can blame Twitter a little bit for this. You can blame Underdog a little bit for this. But I think that people have like that tournament mentality, and sometimes they carry it into their redraft leagues or, in the high stakes perspective, into one of these 12-team closed leagues, and it's just you see people making big mistakes. Maybe you talked about Mike Evans. Maybe you could expand on what makes a guy like Mike Evans more appealing in a closed team league. I'll say for me, a guy like Keenan Allen would be a little more appealing in a closed team league. But maybe you could expand on why that's the case, Dave or Billy.
Yeah. So for me, I mean, I don't have statistics pulled up in front of me, but Mike Evans is good for like a minimum of 1,000 yards and like 8 to 10 touchdowns every year, right? Where you have somebody like Tyreek, who's so boom bust every week that, he may be good for 150 yards and 2 scores, or he may put up a 30-burger and 60 yards and no scores. Like when I'm looking at players that are going to be more consistent, Keenan Allen is another prime example. The dude's probably good for 140, 150 targets, probably going to have, 12 to 1,300 yards, and probably going to have anywhere from 6 to 8 scores, if not more. And so when you look at consistency from that point, and you look at the involvement in the offense, the clear number ones, maybe not so much in 2022. It's not as clear as it was prior years for Keenan Allen, but still, you look at the offense, it's going to be consistent. You look at, the shootout schedule, it's going to be great, and that doesn't matter as much in confined leagues, but overall, these players are very consistent. They have major roles. They're going to have a lot of targets. They're going to have a lot of red zone looks. There's so many things that you can like about them, not only from a tournament perspective, but also from a floor standpoint when it comes to a confined league. Like if you're shooting for the moon and everything you're doing in a confined league, great. You're either first or you're last. There's really not anything in between unless you could fix it on the waiver wire. But in a confined league, you're looking more for that floor necessarily, but you still want upside, but that floor is very important as well.
Dave, anything to add with that?
No, he summed it up. That's exactly right.
One last question in regards to tournament play versus confined leagues. Is your approach to the one-off positions, quarterback and tight end, does it change in a confined league versus a tournament play, and if so, how?
Just like I might push quarterback to an extreme in a tournament because I don't think quarterback in a 4-point pass is going to win you anything at the end of the year. I saw a guy win $500K and he picked up a quarterback on the waiver wire on week 15. Didn't even have a quarterback. So quarterbacks matter if you get Josh Allen and he goes for 50 points 3 straight weeks in the shootout. Well, of course, quarterback matter because probably they're not going to be another quarterback do that. So he could be a difference maker. But most years that's not the case. So I'm fine pushing quarterback. We're in a confined league. I might want somebody that's a little more steady and I know it's not. I might like this guy a lot that I'm taking in a tournament play, but I know he has the chance of not being as consistent as another quarterback that I can get cheaper. And a lot of times in a confined league, you can just say, okay, I'm not shooting for the moon here. I don't have to expand on that position. I can just take the quarterback and move on, lock up the points.
Billy, anything to add on that?
No, I think hammer the nail. Both of our confined leagues, we pushed quarterback up a little bit more. I mean, Dave and I are both notoriously known for pushing quarterback in leagues to the point to where, like, we're comfortable our starting quarterbacks are Jared Goff and Davis Mills, right? But you get into confined leagues, that's not necessarily the case. Like last year we had Kyler Murray in one. and so you need a little bit more consistency at the position. That extra 3, 4, 5 points a week makes a little bit more of a difference in confined league than it does, versus the tournament shootout, where at the end of the day you're just getting down to variance and who's hot at what given time.
And plus, in these FFPC confined leagues, it's called victory points. So it doesn't matter how many you could have. You could be the highest scoring team total points in the league and not even make the playoffs. It's happened. But the victory points means consistency. So you're getting awarded either 0 victory points to 4 victory points. So that's where the consistency matters a little bit, because if you fail to pick up victory points, you look up at the end of the year, you might lead the league in total points and not even make the playoffs. It doesn't happen very often, but it can. Theoretically, it can happen.
Yeah, the victory points are very odd. I gotta say it's a weird structure for sure. I want to close out this segment with, what is your approach to, and I'll backtrack. We had the hard way draft where we competed against one another. I like both of our builds. Dave and Billy split a team in that. I had my own team, but you had a beautiful Las Vegas Raiders stack that you built. What is your approach to correlation and stacking in these major tournaments right now? Is it something you're looking to do regularly? Is it something that you walk away from a draft and with no correlation you're upset about? I mean, what is your approach to it at this point in the year?
Are we talking redraft or
just tournaments? Just tournaments
in general. Well, Billy,
yeah.
I'll let Billy talk on that topic, because I'm not as big on stacking and correlation. I understand why you should do it and how you should do it, but I don't go out of my way to do it. But Billy's done a lot more research on correlation and stacking than I have, because in redraft, where I've done majority of my drafts, I don't go out of my way to do it. But Billy,
do you let it break ties? Do you let it break ties, Dave?
I would. If I have a nice team going and I have Justin Fields with, I have Mooney and Clement, and I want Justin Fields to go with it in hopes that he's a Magic in week 17 or whatever. Yeah, I would go out of my way to do that, but I don't go out of my way to do it like routinely in the draft. I'm not looking to do it, but if it falls to me in the right spot and it's not costing me anything as I view it, then yeah, I'll do it.
So for me, it's a loaded question, because I think there's multiple answers depending upon the format that you're drafting in, right? If you are in, let's say, underdog, correlations matter more, because you're trying to beat out an ungodly amount of people in the final weeks, to where you need that correlation or that stack in order to probably be at the top of the leaderboard. Where if
skip best ball, Billy, skip best ball on this one, just for your approach to
Yeah. So if we're in, let's just say, a tournament redraft, I'd still think it's important. It's not as important because now the field is a lot slimmer, right? For me, I'm looking at, like, I'll use it sometimes as a tiebreaker, but bottom line is I'm never, like, this was the words from Todd Burrows, and it stuck with me, was never drop a tier in order to complete a stack, right? And I think that is important, a lesson for many folks, because you see people push players up boards, and you see people who will, reach a half round or even a full round early on someone, and maybe they just got their guy. That's fine, but most of the time it looks like they're completing a stack, and maybe he would have came back to you. So, like, I'm always going to take the better player off the board. I'm going to, do value-based drafting or whatever it may be. It's going to be someone who I think is going to make a bigger impact from a fantasy perspective on any given week. I'm not necessarily going to reach for that guy simply because he's on the same team and it's going to complete a stack for me.
Yeah, you see people reaching just to try to stack it, and it ends up making their team look pretty awful once in a while. Run. Yeah, for sure.
And don't get me wrong, if you hit the stacks, like, you look back and say, hey, if you had the Burrow Chase stack and you had the Josh Allen stack with anyone else, or Mark Andrews and Lamar was a big one last year, right? But until he got hurt. But you look at these correlations, and it does make a difference inside the league, but what player did you give up in order to complete that stack? That's something you have to look at. And, like, you look back at your board, and I say draft board review is one of, a big thing, not only for Dave, but for myself as well. I look back and say, hey, I took, Elijah Moore in the 6th. I passed up on, Amon-Ra St. Brown, or whatever it may be. You look and say, what would my team have looked like had I taken player X over player Y? And then what would that have done differently for me at, the 10th round when I was now forced to take a quarterback? Had I taken maybe Kyler Murray over Elijah Moore, what receiver would I have taken in the 10th? And now you get to look at it from kind of hindsight perspective and say, did I pass on a stack because I didn't want to take the value? What does my team look like had I taken the stack, and what would it look like down like in the future of the board, like 10, 11, 12, 13? How would that have changed my board? Dave is the matrix solver. Like when he talks about solving the matrix, like that's what we're talking about. We're looking at our boards and reviewing them and saying, how can I change my own draft had I done it differently? Or how would this board have changed had I chose to go a different way? And you try to piece that together. And bottom line, what I'm trying to say is utilize that same process when you're looking at stacks and correlations, because had you reached and taken that player, what would your team have looking like had you had just taken the better player on the board and then maybe gotten a later stack? Prime example is like, maybe you were trying to stack an Arizona stack, but you could have waited and taken a Trevor Lawrence build later and stacked up Jacksonville or stacked up Detroit or stacked up one of these cheaper teams and just gone best player available in the beginning.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, because when you do draft board review, not only do you see like I could have done this differently, but what pick did you make that maybe influenced the next 10 picks in your draft? And I think that's a great way of looking at it. Like you talk about Dave with like the matrix, because it's like the sliding doors of drafts. This influences this happens, and it kind of changes an entire board. I think it's a great process. I don't have any more questions about your guys' process. You guys were very generous in sharing those. I want to kind of get to some nitty gritty here.
Theo, sorry, buddy. I tried to message you, but before we get to it, I know I stepped away for a bit. But we had some questions from the chat. Did you manage to answer some of those, or do you want me to just kind of throw them?
Oh no, go ahead, JD. Throw a question in.
All right. So, did you guys answer Frank with regards to preferred structural start for this year?
I'll say first for me. I've liked my teams so far this year with a, we can call it whatever we're calling it, punt RB2, hero RB, an anchor RB. I've kind of liked having one running back that I can really lean on, and I know that they're going to have high production and high volume, barring an injury. And then I'm able to attack, wide receiver, get an elite tight end, whatever I really want to do. I've kind of liked my teams with that. I don't hate my teams. If I go running back, I just haven't been doing that as often. How about you, Billy?
I don't have a preferred method. I think Dave agrees with this one. We'll take anybody anywhere if it makes sense. Yeah. But it's if I, gun to my head, had to pick, like my preferred method is hero RB, just because you have the flexibility of doing so many things later. But I mean, I'll take a tight end for round one. I'll take 4 or 5 straight wide receivers. I don't really care. But I think again, like I don't like to look at something as a preferred structure, because I think you get in that mindset of I have to do this, and I think that's a bad mindset when you're in tournament play or even in a confined league. It's bad mindset. Like if value falls to you, even though you wanted to start off hero running back, what happens if like Chase falls to the 9 hole? Like I'm probably taking Chase because he's not falling the 9 hole that often, right? So I don't think it's a good strategy to go into a draft with the mindset of I have to start off running back, or I need to start off with running back, because who knows, you may have another running back fall to you in round 2 and you started off with a running back, and next thing you know, you're double running back. So you need to be fluid. You need to be able to be malleable and make adjustments.
No, I agree with that. I think that's probably one of the smartest things anybody said on this pod in a long time is don't have a structure plan heading into a draft. Would be probably the best advice you could give. Dave, anything to share on that? And anything, maybe you could say how do your teams, we can say, I know that you don't necessarily have a preferred structure build, but your teams that you've drafted a lot so far, how do you like the way they look? Is there a start that's made them look more appealing or less appealing? Like your strongest teams right now, what do you think you started with?
I'm assuming Frank's talking about best ball because he's talking about win rates, and that's where win rates are most talked about. But literally, Frank, I've drafted every structure you can imagine so far. I've probably done 100 drafts so far, and I've probably done the 2 running back start. I've done 3 running back start. I've done 4 wide receiver start, tight end 4 wide receiver start. And all of them have pros and cons. Now, some of them you can look at and say, I didn't make out a running back here. I took some guys that I think have upside, but I could be without a running back for the first 3 weeks of the year, and then I don't know where I'm at in 11 week season or whatever. So those structures tend to be a little more tricky, and I probably wouldn't go that route frequently. But in tournaments, I'm willing to gamble a little bit and structure teams differently. But I've literally done every structure that you could possibly do this year, I think.
And so I think this is also an important topic to hit in terms of like the draft time in which you're like in the month of the year in which you're drafting, right? Because you look back at drafts from like, January and February. Yes, we were drafting in January for 2022. So January, February, March, and there was just so much value at the board at running back. I mean, Miles Sanders was going in around 9-10 in some leagues. And now, you look at draft boards and he's going in like 7, 8, 9 sometimes, right?
He's touching in the sixth round right now.
Yeah, so depending upon the format, 3 wide receiver, 2 wide receiver, depending where he's going to fall. But I mean, you look at that and get 3 round of value. I'm not starting running back when I see that much value on the board in the beginning of drafts. Like I had so many 0 running back teams because I was able to go like from like round 7, 8, 9, 10. I was able to get running backs like I'm trying to think off the top of my head. It was good. It was running backs like Singletary or AJ Dillon, Pollard, Penny, who am I thinking of here for
Chase Edmonds?
Chase Edmonds.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can get 4 or 5 running back ones that late in a draft. I'm never going to take a running back in the first 2-3 rounds. Where now a lot of those players are 2, 3, 4 rounds ahead of their ADP of where they were in February, March, and April, and now you're forced to alter your plan. So again, be malleable. You look at things and say draft board review. Where have players moved? Where are they going to? Because their strategy in February, March, and April is not the same strategy you're going to have come July and August. Like Zeke was going in around 6. He's back in round 3, 4 now. And to look back and say, I'm going to take Zeke in round 3, you're not competing with the team who took him in round 6, right? So you got to just be fluid here.
So the true answer is it depends on when you draft them.
Yeah, it really does.
When the value changes.
I think I'm and I've talked about this. I'm also, as the preseason gets closer and we have more clarity, I'm way more willing to do these hyper fragile builds, whether it's 3 RBs, 4 RBs. I don't do too many that have but then when, you talk about January, Billy, when we were drafting, I'm going super thin and high with the receivers. And then I'm loading depth late in the drafts at running back because it's cloud and the nature of the position. So like you said, it definitely depends on the time of the year. And the last thing I'll add, guys, this is supposed to be fun. So if you go into every draft doing the same thing with the same guys, how freaking boring is that going to be, man? Play around with it. You see these guys on the screen. They're the best players in the world, and they don't give a shit what draft spot they're at, who they get in the first 2 rounds. That all it does is it paints the picture and gives directions on what they're going to do later in the draft. But guys, have fun with it, man. Take guys early, take guys late, have fun with your builds and mix it up so that you learn as well. If you're doing the same thing all the time, you're not going to grow, man, as a drafter.
So I wanted to quickly pivot to tiers. We talked about tiers. Dave's not a huge fan of using tiers. Billy, how about you when you're like sitting down ready to draft? Do you ever look at tiers for positions?
Yes and no. I mean, I have tiers, but it's like when you talk about early tiers, it's again, people are interchangeable to me, but I will make tiers. I'll do projections, but it's not necessarily going to influence how I'm going to draft. I will utilize it as a guideline, but it's not, again, never etched in stone. But we're talking, top 2 tiers here, and I have them, but it's again just kind of a rough mold.
Yeah, for sure. And Dave, maybe share why you don't like using them.
Maybe I shouldn't say that because maybe it's not entirely true. Maybe I subconsciously have tiers when I'm looking at the board, but I don't have a sheet with like players ranked in tiers. Maybe subconsciously in my mind, I do tiers based on what I'm doing with that particular team. That might be the better answer.
That's what I liked about his answer, Theo, is that you said it just depends on what I'm building, and those tiers will change, right, as that draft develops. I like that, man, like water, right?
He's Rain Man too. He's got them all memorized.
Exactly. When you do this many drafts, and they're all difficult drafts, or not necessarily difficult, but skin in the game drafts where you've been drafting against people who also are drafting a lot of teams. You kind of are able to recognize the value there without referencing anything. You're just kind of able to do it. How about for you, Billy, right now? Maybe we'll start at the quarterback position. Who is in your top tier right now?
There's only one. It's Josh Allen.
And then
tier ends at Josh Allen.
And how many guys are in tier 2?
2, Herbert, Mahomes.
So I have the same. I have Josh Allen kind of in a tier of his own, and I also put Lamar Jackson into that next tier. Kyler Murray almost makes it for me, but he's got a little more red flags. It would be a 3-man quarterback tier 2 for me with Lamar, with Mahomes and Herbert. Dave, maybe anything to add on those quarterback selections we made?
No, I agree. As far as quarterbacks, I like Josh Allen above everybody else this year. I think he has the highest ceiling if we're talking about just pure ceiling. I don't think there's another guy that and he actually goes cheaper than in drafts where I actually own a little Josh Allen this year. Where in years past I would have never probably owned him, but it just felt right. And to me, he's definitely the guy by himself this year.
Now, Theo, when you said you have Lamar in there, right? Like, even though I have Mahomes at that end tier of tier 2 for me, like if I start, and this kind of piggybacks off what Dave said, if I have a Mark Andrews start, you better believe Lamar just got bumped into that tier, right? I'm not gonna say, hey, he's not in my tier 2, I'm not gonna take him. Like, no, that's a mistake. Right. Again, you want to be malleable. You want to say, hey, I don't care if I have Herbert ranked ahead of him or whatever it may be. This makes more sense for my team. And now I'm not willing to reach for him again. So it's a happy medium here. You're not going one extreme or the other extreme. You know, you may pass on him in order to try to get him at a discount in the next round and then adjust and go to your next tier of quarterbacks or your next stack, whatever it may be. So again, those tiers are also fluid, right? So when you're drafting, don't just stick to them. That's where Dave says it can mess people up, because I don't want to say, oh man, I have Mahomes as my next tier here, I have to take him here. Like, no, you're gonna create a shitty team if you do that. So make sure that you are making sure of what's on the board and what's going to come back to you at the same time.
Yeah, that's a great point by Billy in terms of the letting correlation influence him after he's made the pick. He doesn't go into a draft saying I'm getting an Andrews Jackson stack like some people might. He says, I drafted Andrews, I happened to get Andrews, and now Lamar becomes more appealing to me in my process the rest of the draft. JD, anything to add at the quarterback spot?
I've got the 5 in one tier. I know Allen's the 101 every time, but I've got, Herbert, Mahomes, Lamar, and then Kyler's the 5th guy in that first tier for me. Those are the guys I'm, if I want one of those top guys, especially in a super flex, those are the guys I like. I like that Kyler is always falling, with a bit of uncertainty you have there. Hopkins on suspension, but no, I think, look, we named those 5 quarterbacks. I think that's whether you have 1 or 2 tiers, those are the premium guys at the position for sure.
And then my thought process on quarterback, look at the year Phillip Rivers went undrafted and he finished top 5 quarterback. So that happens every year. People, we forget because we're into the new year and guys want a quarterback, but every year there's 2 or 3 guys that go way lower than they should go. So you can tear them all you want, but the guy still might beat your brains in with taking Phillip Rivers on a free agent wire and he finishes as a top 5 quarterback. There's always a quarterback like that every year for whatever reason. I don't know if it's poor evaluation by the fantasy community or what, but every year there's quarterbacks that way outperform where they were taken in drafts.
Burrow certainly won people a lot of money last year, and he certainly was not.
He came off the waiver wire in the main event.
Yep.
The guy won the $500K and got him off the waiver wire in the main event. So.
And we talked, Theo, about the correlation between, well, I do anyways, investing and fantasy football, right? What was I hate when I do that. I just brain farted. I had such a good thought. I promise it was a good one. I have this blazing headache. If I think about it, Theo, I'll give the little finger up.
In like 2 weeks, we're gonna get.
Oh yeah, what I was gonna say is this. No, what I was gonna say is this. Sorry guys, is it's uncomfortable, right? You always learn in investing, the best time to buy is when it's uncomfortable. Throwing Goff out there, as your QB1 or like you said, Wentz. Hub, it's uncomfortable doing that. It's comfortable taking Mahomes early or Allen, because then you're safe at the position, right? Those uncomfortable builds, those are the unique ones that we talk about, and that'll probably get you the big prize.
Pivot over to running back, Billy. Let's rip through this one. Who's in your top tier of running backs?
JT, CMC.
I'm the same. I think that's pretty clear right now. N tier. How about tier 2? How big is it for your tier 2 of running backs?
Five players roughly. You could argue 6 or 7, but Eckler, Swift, Cook, Barkley, Najee. I mean, you could. I mean, I would probably throw ETN in there, but I'm not going to say that now.
Fournette, does Fournette get in there?
No, Fournette's a tier down for me.
Okay.
I had the same guys in my tier 2. So it looks like we're winning a lot of money this year, Billy. I had Austin Eckler, Dalvin Cook, Saquon Barkley, DeAndre Swift, Joe Mixon, and Najee Harris. I would say that for those guys, I'll probably have more of a clear idea of how I would rank the 6 at the end of the summer when we get into the big money weeks. But now I want to have a little bit of exposure to all of them. Obviously, Saquon's been the cheapest, so he's probably the most appealing right now. But
crazy how far he was going, right? What was he going? 4th,
Yeah.
5th, something like that.
No, he was.
I have a share in like 4-4, 4-3 in tournaments.
Crazy.
And I think you're going to start seeing him get pushed up to the 1-2 turn. I think it's going to be like you'll see a lot of Saquon 1-2 turn people. So anything to share on those running backs, Dave? Is there anybody else you would have thrown in that tier 2?
I think we're going to be surprised at the end of the year that there'll be a new 101 next year. I don't think it'll be JT. I like JT, and I take him when I'm in the 1-0 because of my process that if you don't take him in the 1-0, you're going to have 0 exposure, and he's a guy that's capable of having huge games when it matters. A lot of this matters in weeks, the shootouts when it matters. So you got to look at schedule and what. But I think there's going to be some guys that go in the 3rd round right now, late 2nd, 3rd, that could definitely move up to the 1st round after people see what they do this year. So, and I like Swift, ETN, guys that catch the football, Aaron Jones, Dalvin Cook. Those 4 guys stand out to me.
Yeah, I agree with you, and we're going to get to that. I have a question later on about some of these aged out running backs, so we can get back to that, Dave. Let's do wide receivers, Billy. Why don't I start with my tier 1, and then you share your tier 1, because I know yours is going to be get some jaws dropping on the table. So my tier 1 is Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, and Jamar Chase. How about you?
Jefferson in tier.
Okay. So it's Jefferson clearly head and shoulders above those 2 guys. Is there something just, we don't want to, we could speak about this tier alone for 45 minutes.
So
even
though, hold on, Billy, even though you poo-pooed his playoff run from 15 to 17, you still put him as the 1.
Yes.
Nice.
And again, it breaks down to consistency, right? You look at what he has done over his short career, and as monstrous of a season that Cooper Kupp had last year, I just don't think it's repeatable, right? You now have the hardest strength of schedule in the NFL. You have Allen Robinson who's arrived. You have now a healthy running back core. There's a lot of changes going on at this offense. Defenses will adjust. Where Jefferson has just been consistent and consistently great in this offense, regardless of strength of schedule, regardless of matchup, unless he's facing Jair Alexander. But that being said, Jefferson is just, to me, head and shoulders above, more consistent and elite than all the other tiers. Now, for me, Chase is in the very next tier. It's going to be Chase, Kupp, Evans, Diggs, and Lamb for me in that tier.
So for me, I would have a tier 2 of Diggs, Lamb, and Evans, and then I'll kind of share my tier 3 was only 3 guys, so I might as well give them. It's Debo, T. Higgins, and Michael Pittman. Those would be kind of my tier 3. But I love Jefferson. I fired him up. He's my wide receiver 1. But I do think that not a whole lot has changed in terms of Cooper Kupp this year that would make me want to bump him down too much. But I do love the fact that I think Justin Jefferson, we used to talk back in the day about year 3 wide receivers, and they take a leap in year 3. I think that, Jefferson just keeps getting better and better and better. And he's my wide receiver 1. And I love Jamar Chase as well. So I really love my teams when I have one of those guys on them. But I think that tier 2 and tier 3 for me are guys that I'm happy to take as well. David, are we missing out on any wide receivers that might have been in there?
I think all those guys, a lot of those guys you're talking about are interchangeable. I like Justin Jefferson, the player. I don't like his year-end schedule. I've drafted him some. I love the talent. But when I look at his year-end schedule, I'm just not sure he's going to win me a ton of money at the end of the year. So I've taken Diggs 4 overall. I like Diggs a lot. I like CD a lot. I like Mike Evans a lot. I like Devontae Adams a lot. Those guys stick out to me. I take all
Adam
those
should
guys.
have been. Adam should have been in my tier 2. Excuse me
If
on
I was
that.
doing
I
one draft, if I was doing one draft, I'd take all those guys over Jefferson and Jamar Chase. If I had one bullet to win $500K, I would take all 4 of those guys over Jamar Chase and Jefferson this year.
Now, what about confined league?
Confined league, probably not. But if I was in tournament play,
that's interesting. Yeah, you make a big case for Diggs there. And we've actually had. We're not going to ask you two guys tonight, but we've had pretty much any analyst or guest we've had come on, whether they're a high stakes player or an analyst. We've asked them one question: if there's a wide receiver that's going to finish wide receiver 1 overall, and it's not named Jefferson, Kupp, or Chase, who would it be? And we've had a number of really sharp people on the Diggs train, finishing wide receiver 1 overall. So it's like you talked about Josh Allen, it's his clear top weapon. You know, it's Diggs could just go nuclear this year. So I'm that kind of gets me eye opening to hear you say that, Dave, as well. So, Billy, anything to add on the wide receivers? Can we move to the tight ends?
Yeah, if I had to pick a receiver who's going to finish one who's not one of those 3, it's going to be Evans or Lamb.
Evans or Lamb for you?
Lamb was my answer. What about Dave? I want to know Dave's answer. Theo, why wouldn't we ask him? Come on, man.
I like all 4 of those guys: Diggs, Lamb, Evans, and Adams. I think any one of those 4 can finish 1 overall outside the chalk. What I call the chalk. I look at chalk drafting. A lot of what I do is I look at how the chalk goes, and then I adjust off of what the chalk's doing to build unique builds. So on guys that I've evaluated film on or seen them play in the NFL, obviously for years, and their situations. So that's what I'm trying to do when I'm doing that.
I was just saying because of the tiers, they were not contractually obligated to answer that that question tonight. So I owe them some money now in the Venmo after the pod. Thanks a lot, JD. Let's do tight end here, Billy. Who's your top tight end tier?
Andrews and Kelsey. And
okay, so
it's chalk. It is, and I would debate. Honestly, I'd debate Andrews might be in a tier of his own this year. That might be contrarian to most, but. There's a lot of dysfunction inside the Chiefs' offense this year, and it may affect Kelsey. And I think that Andrews has the best chance of being the tight end 1 again. But I think, I could argue Kelsey could be in tier 2 with Pitts and Kelsey as a separate tier. But I'm going to just go chalk and say Andrews, Kelsey 1 tier, and then Pitts, Waller, Kittle. It's tight ends are chalk this year for the first 5 or 6, honestly.
So I'm with you on tier 1 is Andrews, Kelsey for me, but tier 2 I kind of have Pitts all in his own for tier 2. Just more appealing to me than those other 2 guys. There's more question marks. Dave, anything to add with the tight ends?
If I can give anybody advice out there that's doing say 4 leagues and they're trying to win $500K, do not take a tight end in the first 5 rounds. There's plenty of guys later that could outperform all those guys. I'm a big Mark Andrews guy. I love the guy, but if you're doing 4 or 5 drafts and you're competing against people like me that do 100 or whatever, don't take tight end in the first 5 rounds. Build your team different than that and find you somebody in the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th round. Probably not even the 7th, 8th this year. I even give some free advice. Skip the 7th, 8th, 9th round. There's nobody there that's a value. Wait till the 10th, 11th, 12th round to take your tight end, and I guarantee you'll like your team a lot better, and your team will be more competitive throughout the year.
That's where I find my Alberto and Robert Tonyan shares, right in that range.
Not too bad. Like Alberto, like Irv Smith, there's a lot of guys there that could way outperform what people think they might.
Great advice.
I want to move on to some hard hitting redraft questions. Let's just go through these. Right now, the Buccaneers wide receiver situation becomes even more important now that the perceived retirement of Robert Gronkowski happened today. We're seeing Mike Evans go in the late 2nd. We're seeing Russell Gage squarely as a wide receiver 3-ish range, and we're seeing Chris Godwin usually in the 6th round. What is your guys' approach to the Buccaneers wide receivers right now? Does anyone stand out? I know you're all Mike Evans fans, but maybe your general approach to the Bucs wide receivers right now. Start with Billy and then go to Dave.
Gage has been a free ticket as of late, and he's been climbing up boards because he was even way more free when he was first signed by the Buccaneers. So Gage has been a target of ours for quite some time, and even in our solo drafts, you were able to stack him with like Hopkins and counteract that suspension pretty cheaply quite frankly. And so I've been targeting Gage a lot. I'm not going to chase him up too much further, but just because of the discount that we have in our drafts that are already completed. But Gage is hands down number 2 for me in that offense. And then Brait was a significant discount who's just going to climb the ladder. I mean, that was just an obvious one too. Like, you knew if Gronk retired, who was going to benefit the most? It was going to be Brait. So I think I had like 18% Brait heading into today, and now the discount's gone. But I would say easily Gage and Evans.
One of the best tight end threes before today.
Gage is my number 1 owned receiver in all the drafts I've done so far. He was way too cheap. I thought Gronk was going to retire. I thought Gronk had enough. Yeah. It's just a gut feeling I had this year. So I haven't drafted any deal. And I'm feeling generous tonight. I'm gonna give some advantage. Go watch some tape on a kid named Otten that's going to play for Tampa Bay this year. He'll remind you a lot of Gronk. And I like Cameron Brait, but he's 30 years old. They went and drafted this kid, used 4th round draft capital on him. Otten might surprise you, some people at tight end. Every year there's a couple of tight ends that surprise. Watch a little tape on Otten before you start hammering Brait in the 8th, 7th, 8th, 9th round.
Yeah, Cade Otten's super interesting. That's a great name to throw out there, Dave. And I'll say that, like Russell Gage, you're not getting the same ADP discount, but you could paint a picture where he has Hunter Renfrow-like production this year just as a target monster in Tampa. So I wonder, just as a quick follow-up, Billy, is there a point where he's going to rise? Is there a point where you're out on him if he rises up to like a certain point? Maybe
I haven't checked draft boards today, but I think it's already here.
So he's right now, football guys, he's in the 8th round.
Yeah.
Well, he'll be higher than that.
Drafting season has different phases, so Billy can't say that totally because we're going to main event drafting season.
Well, let's do a bit of OTC,
so,
guys. Let's do a bit of OTC. Do you guys prefer Gage or Burks or London?
I'd still
give me Gage.
Yeah, I'd
right now.
still take
so
Gage
both
right
both
now.
Those guys going ahead of him. Hunter Renfrow or Russell Gage?
Gage.
DeAndre Hopkins or Gage?
Gage
because of the 6 weeks.
Amon-Ra Sam Brown?
Depends who my first 3 or 4 receivers are on the last one. Because if Hopkins is my 4th or 5th receiver, I'll take Hopkins. But if he's like my 3rd receiver, then I'm going to take Gage.
What about Juju?
What about him?
And Gage
easy.
I'm naming a bunch of guys ahead. Elijah Moore. How about Elijah Moore?
I'll take Elijah Moore.
So that's where
I'm on Rob 1, JD.
So you're about halfway through the 6th, and you get to Elijah Moore. So he's got about a
but that's what I'm saying. Like that's where he's gonna bolt to easily, right? The masses have to have the painted picture, have the picture painted. Say that 10 times. Gee, that's a riddle. They have to have it, spelled out for him in order to know that that's where he's going to shoot up to. Where if you look at target share and vacated targets and do all the math in the beginning and say, hey, I'm going to take you got to look at not just from a standpoint of Gronk retiring, but what was Godwin's recovery like? And is Godwin going to make it back? And if, what time is he going to make it back? Because even if Gronk came back, Gage was still going to have one hell of a beginning of a season, right? Because of his amount of vacated targets that were going to be there from Godwin being absent those first X amount of games. So the discount didn't make sense. It was just too cheap. And that's why it was like an instant lock every time we were in draft rooms together. And again, like Dave and I were drafting solo before we start drafting together every year. And it's like, oh, who's one of your most owned wide receivers? And, Russell Gage. Okay, great. He's on top of my list too. Like we're drafting him every time because it's just dirt cheap. And so if I'm in a tournament that I'm already playing in, I'm not chasing him. But Dave brings up a good point. We start drafting mains and world championships where we haven't entered a room yet because they're not available. I'll draft him again because I'm not competing versus my round 11 or 12 Russell Gage anymore. And so now I'm not going to chase him up because I don't want to compete versus my teams that already have 5-6 rounds of value.
Pivoting on to the LA Chargers, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams ADPs are merging. I think you're starting to see Mike Williams go ahead of him in certain drafts. Williams seems to have the steam right now. He's got a lot of juice. Are players reading this situation correctly? Do you have a preferred Los Angeles Chargers wide receiver right now? Start with Billy.
I'm going to let Dave answer that because I'm looking up a statistic for the chat.
They haven't merged yet. In the drafts I've seen, Mike Williams still majority of the drafts goes in like the early 5th, and Keenan still lives in the 3rd. So
I think it's more of a like, okay, so we'll say for football guys, I agree with you. Underdog, you're seeing, I think Williams has jumped him. in underdog. So it's
Oh,
like
underdog, yes. See, I don't do
usually,
underdog.
so usually I feel like it's the momentum kind of carries over, and I think that when we get into like training camp and stuff, I think I could see people painting a picture where they're real close. Let's say that they're within, by main event season, they're within 8 or 9 spots of one another. Do you have a preference on that, Dave, or are you still Keenan's still the man there for you, or?
Keenan didn't look right to me towards the end of last year. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but he didn't look right to me. So I don't own much Keenan. Give me Michael Pittman in that range easily over Keenan, and they go similar. They're drafted similarly together. Pittman looked like he was on the – I'm big on watching at the end of the year how players look to me. And Keenan didn't look as good as he has in years past to me, where Michael Pittman looked like a kid that's fixing to explode and could finish as the number 1 receiver in fantasy, even though he's on a run-heavy offense. It's just how they use him and how they're going to use him. So I would probably be in the Mike Williams camp because Mike has always been an explosive guy. Seems like he has great rapport with Herbert now. And if you go back and look at Mike Williams' college tape, I mean, you've seen glimpses of it in the NFL. And last year he finally kind of put it together. But he has the talent to be like out of this world. And he seems to be gelling with Keenan with Herbert, where Keenan didn't look quite right to me at the end of the year. We'll see how that plays out. But and Josh Palmer's there too, so we'll see.
I think that it's, for me, it's like Allen. We talked about closed leagues versus tournament. Like Allen's, it seems like, he's got a floor. Mike Williams, to me, if you had to pick one of them, that's going to have just an absolutely insane year, it would be Williams. I don't know if I'm in on either one of them. I just feel like a lot of Chargers are really juiced up right now. But if I had to pick one in terms of value, Williams is going behind them, and I think he might have the higher ceiling. Billy, you were writing a novel over there. Anything to add with our Chargers?
Real quick, I want to touch base. Someone in the chat said we were really high on Gage, bullish on Gage. I think it was Josh, and I posted the reason why. You look at vacated targets. Tampa had 186 vacated targets to start the year in 2022. If you add in Godwin's target share, thank you for posting that. Now I have to read this little chat on the side. First 4 or 5 weeks, we're talking about 220 vacated targets now, roughly, depending upon how many weeks Godwin is out. That's a lot of vacated targets. That number alone, the 186, was 26% of this team's target share that was up for grabs. 26%. So if Gage even sees 18, 19% of that, which I think is going to be a low number, we're talking about, a lot of targets. So that's the reason why we're really high on Gage. Now,
and another factor is, are we even sure Godwin's going to play this year? I mean,
exactly.
People are
That's what I'm
Godwin
saying.
like he's going to play. Godwin
I've been
blew out
avoiding
his
him.
knee
I've been avoiding him.
At the end of the year. It wasn't at the beginning of the year. He blew out his knee at the end of the year. And they went out and got Gage, so they might know more than what we might know. And so I'm not sure. Godwin's being overdrafted in my eyes. And I'm a Godwin homer.
Agreed.
But Godwin
And
might
why
not
would
have
they-
the year everybody's envisioning.
And why would they rush him back? Even if he's
Exactly.
ready to go after week 6 or
no,
week
they
8,
re-signed him for
Why
a playoff push, in my
This
opinion.
is a Super Bowl team, guys. They're here
Yeah.
to win Super Bowls. They don't need Godwin to win season games.
Yeah.
Okay.
So-
Godwin and Gage rant back to the side. I'll go back to your Mike Williams question here. Although I have Keenan Allen designated for a higher target share and more volume in the passing game, I still think Mike Williams has the higher upside. You see their ADPs are closer on sites like Underdog than they are on, some other platforms. That being said, I think it's important to mix that exposure. I agree with Dave. When you watch tape, Keenan Allen just looked like he was missing a step down the stretch and just didn't look right. Maybe it was an injury we don't know about. We don't have all the answers, but when it comes down to trust, I still think that Keenan Allen is going to be the most trusted target. But Mike Williams, it would not surprise me if he's a round 1 pick next year, right? If he has 12, 13 touchdowns and 1,200 yards, and then next thing you know, he's the he's the wide receiver 1 heading into 2023 for the Chargers with Herbert. So I'm going to say I like them both. I lean Mike Williams for upside, but I think it's important to grab some shares of Keenan Allen as well.
The 2 players we see flying up draft boards, Dave just mentioned Michael Pittman, and we guys mentioned Travis Etienne in passing earlier in the show when we talk about these running backs. but we're seeing these two players really fly up the draft boards. Michael Pittman's consistently being drafted like wide receiver 12. We're starting to see ETN creep into the second round. He rarely lasts past like the 2-3 turn. Are we going to get to a point where they get so aggressively priced that maybe they become less appealing, or is there really no ceiling with these two guys?
When we change drafting seasons, I'll reevaluate that. Right now, I can't really draft ETN anymore. I have 6th-round shares of him, late 5th-round shares of him on teams that are just don't even make sense now when you look at it. But so now I probably won't draft ETN as much if I depend on the rest of the June and into July. But when drafting season, I value ETN a lot, so I'm definitely going to have shares of ETN in the main event. We'll see where he settles in at. What people's my risk tolerance is going to be higher than a lot of people's. So when main event season rolls around, I'll own shares of ETN wherever he goes.
I'm with you on that. I think that he's the kind of guy that you want to have exposure to in the very high stakes tournaments. And Michael Pittman's like interesting. He's getting priced to a point where I'm not sure. Like for me, it's like I put him in my 3rd tier of wide receivers. I still really, really like him. But I don't know how much further up he can get steamed. Just because, like you said, it's a run-first offense. He's already going to get, potentially up there at like wide receiver 10-ish. So I'm not sure. How about you, Billy? I know you already have exposure to both these guys. So maybe we can take this to Dave's response where we can fast forward to August. Is there a point where you're out on these guys?
Yeah, I'm already out on ETN climbing. Same thing Dave said, just the value we were getting earlier is gone, and again, you're not competing with it. Pittman, again, also being priced out of discounts. Like I was talking off air, I have around 7.4 of Michael Thomas. I have Mike Williams at 6.8 on that same team, right? Like those, you're not getting those type of discounts anymore. And so again, that's a different tournament. So I'm okay taking him around 3 in the current tournament. But I mean, if he starts going ahead of players like Mike Evans, no, forget about it, right? I'm not chasing the high. I'm priced out kind of middle of the 3rd round on Pittman right now, even though I think he has the talent to be a top 5-6 receiver in this league.
Two tight ends. Oh, I'm sorry, JD. Do you have a point to add on?
I was just gonna say when you buy your deodorant on sale at $3.99, it's really hard to go back and buy it at $8.99 at full price at Shoppers Drug Mart. I don't even know if you guys have Shoppers Drug Mart down there, but it's all these guys you're naming, Theo, and you and I went through this with Etienne. Like we took him a little earlier. But then I did my football guys after that. I started, and he was there. But taking him in the 3rd, it's like he was in the 4th and 5th, like you were saying. And same with Pittman, man. These guys are going so much. So it gets harder for me. For me, it allows me to differentiate my rosters now. Like maybe I got less of those guys, and I'm getting other guys in those ranges. It's hard, like I said, to pay that price when you were getting it for maybe half the price, not that long ago.
So I don't have Shoppers here, but I'll never pay $8.99 for deodorant. We got just a quick one because we've had a couple comments and questions about Javonte. He was a hot topic coming into the offseason. It's cooled down, as they say. Dave, I'll go to you first, and then Billy. How do you guys feel about the young running back out in Denver?
I like Javonte. The negatives on Javonte is Melvin Gordon, but I'm not so sure Melvin. I think Javonte is going to be more involved this year. So there's a price where I would be in on Javonte because I think he's the type of player, if you could get a team to like the weeks to the shootout, he could be low owned because he might not he might not have the huge season, regular season, but he's the type of guy that can really produce the ceiling you're looking for. So I'm definitely going to have some Javonte exposure. And he goes sometimes at a reasonable price in some drafts. So it just depends. When he's in the early 2nd, I'd leave him alone. But when he gets into the 3rd, middle of the 3rd, I definitely think you should have exposure to him.
I agree with Dave on that one. Not to jump Billy, but like where he's being drafted right now, he's definitely got a ton of upside. Where you can get him at like the 302, where a while ago he was going close to the 1-2 turn. So I'm on Javonte at those prices. How about you, Billy?
I'll take him in the middle of the third. I'm not taking him any earlier, really. He was on my fade list to begin the season. That's posted for free over at Full Time Fantasy, but a lot of it was Melvin Gordon. I anticipated them re-signing him. I agree with Dave. I think he'll take on more of that role down the stretch, but there was early drafts where he was going. I saw him go as high as the 104 in
I was just gonna say, man, he was going super high.
and it's like, what the fuck are you guys doing, right?
Yeah.
Like that's like he would have to literally outperform his ceiling in order to give you that return. Now, Dave said, no way in the middle of the second, like F no in the first round. And then you get into the third round, at least now he's starting to give you at least an expected return on value. And so when I look at this, you brought up investments. I look at players like investments and I say, how am I going to be able to cash on this investment? And you never want to buy a house high and sell it low, right? A player is the same way. You want to buy him low and sell him high. So I'm not going to take Javonte in round 1. I'm going to wait until the news affects his ADP, like I was telling people to do. And here we are. Now he's in round 3. Now you can start taking him because now he has a chance to outperform that ADP. Where like top 4 picks, forget about it. It's not going to happen.
2 tight ends who had a lot more juice in 2021 were TJ Hawkinson and Dallas Goddard. They're now going at a more reasonable range in the draft this season. They're not next to one another ADP wise. I just was curious your take on these 2 players. So very quickly, are these players fades, values, or targets? Start with Billy.
Dave and I push tight end. I don't think I'll own much of either of these guys. Just
Okay.
because of the cost. I'll own a couple of them just to have a few shares, but I'm not actively targeting these guys in drafts based upon their cost right now.
And you
Dave,
said
anything done?
you said Schultz and Goddard.
No, I put Goddard and Hawkinson.
Oh,
Schultz
Hawkinson.
we've talked about on this
Yeah.
show a lot. Those
I
2
own-
are a little more interesting to me.
I own very little Hawkinson and own a little more Goddard. Goddard has a seal. I like Goddard a lot more before AJ Brown's on there. Full disclosure, but I think he's still. I mean, injuries happen in the NFL. He's a guy that could. Another guy I look for this year. I'm drafting for the shootout. I'm not drafting for. So he's another guy that could put together 3 big weeks. He has the skill set that you're looking for. Just depends if Devontae Smith and AJ Brown hog all the targets, then he might not have enough targets to reach his potential. But he has gotten cheaper in drafts. Got a 9th round share of him the other day. So I think he still has some upside there. But I prefer to push tight end. I mean, I have some shares of Andrews, but I have 0 Kelsey. I have some share of Andrews, but my preferred method of drafting is definitely to push tight end because I think there's some tight ends that are undervalued.
Yeah, like to me, Goddard right now is to me he's a value. I like where he's going, and he's a guy that I've ended up with a fair amount of. Hawkinson, I just can't find myself drafting him where he's going. I like the player, but if you line him up side by side with where he's going in the draft, it's not a guy I'm going to have a whole lot about. The Kansas City running back situation is kind of a mess, to say the least. Is there clear value here, or is this a situation that you 2 are avoiding?
It reminds me of the Patriots. It's a shit show. I'm just going to avoid it. I don't own any of them.
Yeah, I have some mistakenly selected picks early in the draft season, but I have been avoiding them since.
It's a tough one. It's a tough one for sure. JD, do you have a favorite right now of CEH, Ronald Jones, or Jerick McKinnon when we consider their ADP price, if you wanted one on your roster?
I just drafted my first CH last night. I think I did a live the Superflex FFPC best ball tourney, and I think I took my first share of CH just because I was going hyper fragile. He was falling at a value. He fit my build. Ronald Jones was a guy I was taking when he was going a lot later in drafts, and he seems to have crept up a bit. Otherwise, like McKinnon is never a guy I was on. I've never been on McKinnon. I've never understood the whole thing with McKinnon. Since he's been in Minnesota, people have been wasting picks on, McKinnon. He's had a couple games in the playoffs. Personally, and whatever, a few like a handful of them here and there, but he's just not someone I ever target.
It's funny. I was going to say if I had to pick one, I was going to take McKinnon.
There you go.
Like that 18th round.
Just because it's the cheapest, right? It's all it breaks down to. Like It's like the Patriots. If in doubt, just select the last one. Like that's what
I will say they went out and got Ronald Jones, so Andy Reid had to have something in mind to go out and waste go pick up the guy. So I mean, they could have a role for him, and he goes cheap enough where he could turn out to be a value this year if there's injuries happen in football. And I don't know exactly what Andy Reid has in mind for him, but he goes cheap enough where he doesn't kill you.
Rojo in like the 12th round, if there's, the 11th and 12th round is kind of interesting because he's going to be the goal line back there, in my opinion. But we'll wait and see. Two wide receivers, Darnell Mooney and Brandon Cooks. Their ADP is similar.
Mooney.
Both project. This not an either or. I know Mooney.
Buzzer.
Boy.
Smash the
Mooney's
buzzer.
Your boy. Both project to a 25% or more target share.
More. How
How do we approach these two players? And how do you balance target share opportunity for players in offenses that we have question marks about, just in general? So we'll start out. Mooney for you is a clear target and value. BiLLiE, how about Cooks?
I like Cooks. I think there's a lot of value there as well. And Cooks is one of the most underrated wide receivers in the league. Like he's so consistent, and you look at the offense and say they're going to be probably a pretty bad offense, but they're also going to be a pretty bad defense. So that's going to equate to a lot of fantasy points and a lot of opportunities in my mindset. That being said, I love Darnell Mooney. Like 140 targets last year. They didn't really add anybody. He showed rapport with Fields. They added 7 undrafted free agents at the wide receiver position. They drafted Velus Jones. Like there's just not a lot for him to compete there. I still expect them to add a veteran presence of some sort. I mean, yes, they had Pringle, but I don't really count that, right? And then so there's still a lot of time for them to add a veteran presence, but in the meantime, I would not be surprised if Darnell Mooney broke 150 targets this year.
Anything to add on that, Dave? For those
I like
two
both guys, but you wouldn't believe the guys I fired Darnell Mooney over this year, so I lean Mooney too. But I own Cooks too. So both explosive guys.
I had Mooney as one of my best values right now, ADP wise. I was on Run Till Daylight with Todd. I think you guys are absolutely right. I mean, even if he gets the exact same amount of targets, you just see Justin Fields get a little more efficient with them, and maybe they target him a little more downfield. I mean, he could absolutely just have an unbelievable season, and you could easily see it go up to 160 targets.
Yep.
Just based on who's around him. So I think he's got a lot of outs to return value.
Him and Fields really seem to gel too. They really seem to have chemistry, and that kid Mooney's explosive. So and Fields has to improve off of last year. He's too talented not to. So a lot to like about Mooney.
Just from a vacated target standpoint, Chicago has 217 vacated targets in the offense. That's 41.5% of their team's target shares available. Do you want to guess how many and what percentage is at the wide receiver position?
Tell us, BiLLiE.
Wild guess. Throw a guess out.
I couldn't say
236.
No, there's only 217 available. Okay, 162 available wide receivers. 75% of that 207, 75% of that 217 is all at the wide receiver position. That's a lot.
I hear these vacated targets in my sleep. Really, I said, can the guy play football? Oh, but there's 17,000 vacated targets in the market. Can the guy catch the football and run with it?
Yes, he can. He's good.
We're gonna start calling him BiLLiE Vacated Targets.
Oh, he's got the vacated targets down.
VT.
If I had a lifeline on that show where you got to call a lifeline, just give me a vacated target deal for me.
I'd like to call Billy Muzio and ask him about vacated targets. Yeah.
When you spend 6.5 hours manually pulling data and creating an Excel sheet, you want to use it because it's a waste of time if you don't. But there's also, I mean, there's a lot to be said about opportunity, right, in the NFL. Most people know that you have to have the opportunity to succeed in the NFL. And when you have that much opportunity at hand, you either one really have to suck or two get injured in order for it not to pan out.
And targets are earned, and he earned them already. So it's like you don't need to galaxy brain this one. He's already a 140 target guy, and in him increasing would be, a very reasonable bet. One wide receiver. We'll talk about wide receivers who are slipping a little bit. DK Metcalf has slipped to the 5th round, and Tyler Lockett's a double-digit rounder. Are these players values, fades, or targets for you guys right now?
Depends on who the Seattle coaching staff picks as the quarterback, in my opinion. If they pick Geno Smith, I love DK Metcalf where he goes. They pick Drew Lock, not so much. So it all depends on if the Seattle coaching staff is smart enough to get the right quarterback on the field. I don't have a lot of faith on that based on their history of putting players that should be playing on the field. So we'll see.
We're all hoping for Geno. How about you, Billy?
I think round 5, DK Metcalf, regardless of the quarterback. I like the value there because if Geno is the quarterback, we're probably going to see start to see DK Metcalf slide back up into like the early 4th, maybe even late 3rd again. That being said, Tyler Lockett is very intriguing because he's going as late as wide receiver 46 and 47 in some of these drafts. And at that point, I mean, who is he really competing against, right? You're talking about a lot of unknowns where he has proven success. And yes, there's a lot of unknowns at his quarterback, but I'm more willing to take the gamble at Lockett and best ball, and I'm less likely to draft him in confined leagues or tournament redraft. So multiple answers to your question there.
Wide receiver 8 and wide receiver 16 the last 2 years, and now he's like down in purgatory land of almost wide receiver 50. So he's definitely an interesting player right now. Stay with the wide receiver position. Drafters are becoming sharper and more aggressive with their approach to the wide receiver position this offseason. You're seeing them being very aggressive, trying to add, these, not letting these top, potential high target guys slip. Has this created a sweet spot for running backs, especially for drafters who have built with a hero or potentially a 0 RB build? Maybe you guys could share a few of your favorite running back targets in rounds 8 through 11. And you could add if you see a different sweet spot than I'm seeing for running back value.
Go ahead, Dave.
I think 8 to 11 is very interesting this year. I mean, you guys consistently, you got guys like Singletary, Edmonds, Pollard, Kareem Hunt, James Cook, Rashad Penny, Chase Edmonds, those type of guys who have a ceiling. They have all those guys have a ceiling. So that's what you're looking for when you're building rosters. So yeah, I think you're onto something there. I think the 8th to 11th round is a very sweet spot for wide receiver. If Ship Chasers ever figures out what running backs to take with their process, they might be in business, and this might be a good year for them.
And it's funny, like you said, Dave, you mentioned a couple of those guys, and a couple of those guys would have been dead zone guys years back. Like, I think people have just gotten sharper on not necessarily, like, the wisdom of the crowd's not pushing up a Penny to like 6th round, and now he becomes kind of appealing, where he's going, or a couple of those other guys. Maybe anything to add, Billy, is are you seeing a similar sweet spot? And do you have any targets that, Dave mentioned a couple of them. Do any of those guys Dave mentioned stand out to you as guys you really are into right now in those rounds?
Yeah, all of them he mentioned. And again, ADP is changing daily, right? But I still think Penny's significant value. I still think Edmonds significant value. Those guys, I mean, are legitimately the RB1s on their team. And you look down at the stretch, and Penny was 670 yards and 6 touchdowns the final few weeks. He was the running back 1 in the league, and people were drafting Walker 2, 3, 4 rounds ahead of him. It just made no sense. And so I think there's a lot of value to be had at the running back position late in drafts this year. Again, that goes not as much as it was in early drafts. Like I said, again, it depends upon the time in which you're drafting and the month in which you're drafting. But, when one door opens, another closes, and that'll present itself another value as we near August time as well.
Last, JD, anything to add on those running backs? Is there a particular one you like?
Yeah, I like the 2 rookies. I like the Isaiah Spiller and the Rashad Whites, where they're going in the 10th round. I like the upside that they offer in specific builds. I like Melvin Gordon in a hyper fragile and even like a late running back. But my favorite guy is Mr. Khalil Herbert out there in Chicago. I love taking him in the 12th round or later, just with what we saw last year and what you talked about. Let's face it, it's going to be a very narrow target tree out there in Chicago. They're going to be running the ball. You've seen, Hub talked about Fields has to grow as a quarterback. Just the talent there is just too much. So I think Herbert just showed that he fits really nicely. Demont obviously has that role ahead, but injuries, obviously a big thing there. But I'm sure Khalil will get worked in a bit more this year after what he showed last year.
I was just watching film on the Chicago running back situation, and it's very interesting. I mean, I like Khalil Herbert, what he showed last year, but they got 2 guys they brought in that could give him a run for his money, for sure.
You like Ebner, don't you, Hub?
Like Ebner. I've always been an Evans guy, so why they bring Ebner is a freak show, and I don't know why they brought Evans there. Evans is a really good running back. So, in my opinion, they might have 3 running backs on the roster that's better than the guy they're starting. So, we'll see how that shakes out.
Evans, never heard of him. Never drafted him before.
Oh, yeah. Or maybe you drafted 80% of them at one point in your life, Billy.
They say that trauma, you block people out, right? And I think that
perfect
might
scenario.
Might be a little trauma there.
In another universe, Darrington Evans was a running back 1 last season, and he would have shipped a lot for you right there. But
the process was right; it just didn't work out.
Process over results in that one for sure. Last year, we saw Jamar Chase and Deebo Samuel help fantasy players win leagues and win major cash. Who were some players going in that 4th to 7th round who could have dramatic impact on winning championships this year for fantasy players? Are there any potential league winners that you see in that same range that Deebo and Jamar were drafted in? Billy, if you have any, go for it.
So Deebo was going like 9-10 in the beginning of drafts, right? And
we'll take it to the main event where, like, I'll say we can
climbed.
stretch it to the
I'm gonna start off with Darnell Mooney because I have to, and then it's gonna be probably like Rashad Bateman. I think Gabe Davis could be that guy. I think Miles Sanders could finally be that guy this year. Are we just talking receivers or just anybody?
Anyone you want, guys that you're seeing as incredible values that with potentially big upsides in that kind of sweet spot round.
Yeah, everyone I just said, and then I'd add in Gage there. I'd add in Chase Edmonds, and I'm going to add in Drake London.
I'll echo your sentiments. I think Bateman, like in range of outcomes, I think he's big time. I love Mooney. I think Mooney's going to reach a certain point because I think he'll get capped slightly by the offense. Where I don't know if he could get that meteoric rise, but you might get him drafted like wide receiver 26 and he finishes wide receiver 11 or 12, something like that. Really helps you win. But I think Bateman's a great name. I'm glad you brought him up. Dave, are you seeing any of those guys in that range that are potentially just meteoric, helping people get wins?
I like all the guys Billy mentioned. I would add Marquise Brown. I think he's sitting in a dream spot with with his college quarterback, and you already saw his talent, and he's going to be in the right frame of mind. But people have already caught on to that. He's basically
3rd round.
He's 4th round, maybe
4, 5. Yeah, you get him sometimes there.
4, 5. But yeah, he's the type of player. He's already shown you that he could be a number 1 wide receiver in the league. So, and he gets to go with a quarterback that suits his strengths. So, he's definitely a guy.
JD, any of those guys really stand out, or anybody you want to add?
Oh yeah. Higgins was in there. I just took Brown in football, guys. It was the 4th. I took Higgins in the 3rd. So Elijah Moore, I like where he's going. You guys named a lot of the guys. The rookies, London and Burks was a good one. You guys named pretty much all of them. I like Dobbins in the 4th, but I don't know that that's like such a great value. I think he's kind of going where he should. I just think you can build a really nice roster taking him as your RB1 in the 4th.
So we are seeing a number of, and Dave mentioned this earlier, where you mentioned the 107, and the 107 you said there might be 15 guys you take there, and I think this kind of ties into it. We're seeing a number of running backs being drafted as running back 1s, really going in like that top 20 that are all 26 and up. Got a lot of guys with tread on the tires. Do you have a fade among these running backs that are being drafted, in the first 2 rounds? Is there a clear fade to you, a guy that you're looking to avoid? Maybe start with Billy on that.
I think Dave and I are the same player, Derrick Henry.
Derrick Henry would be mine as well. Maybe you could expand on that a little bit, Billy.
It's 28 plus years old, 1,400 carries, a plate in his foot, 5 screws in his foot. They lost A.J. Brown. He saw a stack box 24% of the time in 2021. What does that stack box look like in 2022? Is it going to be 27%? Is it going to be 30%? Probably. When you are facing that many people in the box, like, good luck running the ball. There's not going to be as much balance in this offense. They're not going to have the fear of A.J. Brown. I mean, your number 1 receiver right now is Bob Woods. Your number 2 receiver right now has asthma. Your number 3 receiver is, Nick Westbrook-Akeen. And so I just think that they're going to load this box up, and he's going to have a lot more trouble running the ball this year, especially given his foot injury.
Dave, anything to add on Henry?
No, that sums it up. I mean, definitely wouldn't put a lot of money into Henry. If I was doing 4 or 5 drafts, I definitely wouldn't own any. I'm probably going to do 300 drafts, and I'm not going to own any. So,
yeah, and I believe his plays over 20 yards, which we always think of Henry like just rumbling. They went way down. It was like low single digits for explosive plays last year. So I think that there's been some red flags, and I think he made up for it with overall volume and touchdowns, where if you kind of look at like the counting stats, you might not have seen it, but he did have some regression last year already. And I think this year he would be a guy that it would be very difficult for me to take him in those early money rounds.
In the hardway draft, my good friend Austin Martin, I immediately texted him and said, "Man, these dudes are too sharp. They trapped you." he fell to like the middle of the second round, so I had to bust him right then. Like, man, these guys are too good in this draft. They trapped you immediately.
Austin fell on the grenade for us all, for sure. Thank you, Austin. That was like Captain America shit right there.
So 2020, Henry's breakaway rate was at 5.6% of his rushes, and 2021 he was at 4.1. 2019 he was at 5.0. So he dropped almost a full percent or plus from his 2-year or 3-year window.
Yep,
which is pretty significant.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe the yards per carry went down as well. The only devil's advocate argument to Henry that could make us all look wrong is they did throw to him a little bit more last year. Maybe they do this year and he can make up for it a little bit. But again, he's a fade for me, especially with like Dave said, all those, there's a couple of running backs that I think are a little more explosive right behind him, and certainly a number of wide receivers that I think are more appealing than him at cost. We've hit an hour 40. You guys were extremely generous on this. This was an awesome show. I'm so glad we got to put this together. I'll pass it to you, JD.
Yeah, man. Am I on? No, I'm good. You guys can hear me, right? All right.
Yeah.
All right. Testing, professional production here. Guys, this has been awesome. Like, we're at $140. I hope you guys had your pen and papers out. The guys, the strategies. I think Theo brought us up and down draft boards, and gave you guys enough nuggets to, we squeezed these guys pretty good. You see the name on the screen, Billy Muzio. I mean, just one of the best guys I've met in fantasy and one of the best follows out there for sure at FF Muzio. Billy, let the people know what you're doing these days. All the goodness that you've got at full time, and anything else you want to share before we close this bad boy out.
Yeah, I do all the podcasts over at the Full Time Fantasy YouTube channel. I got like 4 of them between Thursday and Friday alone. And then doing a lot of drafts over there at FFWC. Like I said earlier, we redesigned all the website pages. So the lobby pages all the way to all the information page has been redesigned. And I need 6 to fill a best ball draft on Friday at 4 p.m. with Justin Herzig. So if you want to come draft some of the best, come join us. We need 6 players left still.
Might have to jump in, check that out. You said it on Friday at 4?
4 Eastern, yep.
All right, I might check that out. Dave, always a pleasure having you on, man. We love picking your brain. I don't know, the way your Twitter handle is, I'm assuming you don't care to have followers.
No,
you're not looking to build a following.
The Twitter deal goes way back. I'm very horrible at technology and stuff. I feed cows for a living now, so I don't worry about technology too much. I go on there just to mess with people. And some people I mess with I like, some people I mess with I don't like. But the number deal is my friend Derek Pearson set up Twitter for me. He said, "You got to have a Twitter." I said, "I don't even know what Twitter is." But now I got it. It's a great resource for NFL stuff, so I'm glad he did it. But he set that up, and I've never changed it. So those numbers, I don't even know what they are. He did that. So my daughter said she could fix it for me. I said, "Nah, it's fine. I like it."
It's your calling card now, man.
Because you goats has stuck with us for the $140, and you're listening for a reason. You know how good the follow is. It's at 208-858-740. That's the follow. Guys, this has been an awesome show. Theo, this was a blast. Before I get into the quick promos, because we did 0 plugs this entire show, and we got to give our shout out to our partners. Theo, who do we have coming up? I know there's a lot more heat coming. Who do we
So
have?
tomorrow we have Heath Cummings from CBS coming on. Should be a really fun show. And then we're going to continue the high stakes drafts, the high stakes drafts reviews, and also the high stakes guests. We're going to have those guys come on a lot in as we close out June and in July and August. Next week we have Glenn Lowy, a fantastic NFFC and also FFPC player. Also does some FFWC drafts. Just a tremendous player. He's been on the GOAT District before. And then we have Adam Krautwurst of Draft Sharks, a very, very sharp player as well. We also have Adam Levitan from Establish the Run coming on next week. So we're bringing in the heat in the GOAT District. And in July, you'll see kind of a murderer's row of some of the high-stakes players returning onto the GOAT District, as well as a few new ones. At some point, Tommy Libretti is going to be on the show. He took down the Classic and the Silver Bullet in the NFFC. And then we have a lot of repeat guys who have already committed. So we're really looking forward to helping you guys win your leagues and win a lot of cash with us this summer.
Some cash. Guys, the Listener League, if it's not already full, it's super close. So make sure you send in your info. You guys have been awesome, by the way. I believe I replied to everyone. If I haven't, you're in. I'm building a spreadsheet, and if we go over 12 guys, we'll just start a second one. So keep them coming. We're gonna take names till the end of June. So send us your Twitter handle and your full name. FFPC.com, guys. MyFFPC.com. We talk about it every week. There's a reason we all play on the site. You can win $1 million. You can play for $35. You can play for $2,500. You could play for $10,000. Guys, high stakes, the best players, the best formats, the best platform, in my opinion, on the interweb is myffpc.com. And if you're not already on the site, we'll hook you up with a sign-up bonus at GOAT District, and we'll hook you guys up with that bonus. And of course, our friends over at Underdog. Guys, $100 free when you use the code District. At Underdog, you can play for $2 million right now on your phone, on your tablet, on your laptop. Use the code District, guys. Show your support. You put in $100, they will match that $100 easy. Viridian Global, guys. Get your GOAT gear right now. ViridianGlobal.com/collections/GOAT District. Get all your GOAT gear. We appreciate you guys tuning in. This show's been awesome. You guys are awesome. Go out there and draft a winner right now, and we'll check you all later.
GOAT District, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offer's the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice, from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man, y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
Awesome time, guys, as always. That was
blast,
really, really fun. That was